Hi guys, and welcome back to another video. I decided to change the channel language from Italian to English. English is not my primary language, so apologize for any imperfection. Today I'm gonna do a challenge. I will code a Kotlin web application in under 10 minutes. Before starting with the coding phase, let's have a look at the business logic that we are going to implement. I'm gonna implement 4 APIs that will handle the basic CRUD operations over blog posts. Post API that will receive from the HTTP requests an application JSON body that will be a sample post to search on the database. The second one will be a put that writes a single post on the database. The third API would be a post that will have to update a single post existing on the MongoDB. The fourth one, the delete API, will just delete an existing post by passing its own identifier. In this case, the identifier is an hash handled by the MongoDB. As the primary technology stack, I will use Spring Boot along with Kotlin language and MongoDB as the primary database implementation. I will go for NoSQL database. We go to start.spring.io. This is a Spring initializer that will help us to basically obtain a skeleton of our project. So we are going for a Gradle project using Kotlin language. And we are going for the actual major release of Spring Boot, that is the 2.6.2. On the project metadata we are going to use a basic group, so we can go for com.company. The artifact is sample blog backend, and the name can be the same. Description is sample project. We are going to package it in Java. We are going to use Java 11. And now we are going to choose some dependencies that can help us build this thing. So, first of all, we need the Spring Web, because we need to expose some RESTful web services. Also, we need the Mongo database, so we are going for Spring Data MongoDB as NoSQL database implementation. We need only this, so I think that this could be enough. I generated the project, and we are going to open it inside our IDE. I choose to use IntelliJ IDEA for this case. So this is the project I just opened with my IntelliJ IDEA. Looking back to the documentation I just mentioned before, we have to implement 4 APIs. So, first of all, I'm gonna create a package named APIs. Inside that, I'm gonna create a Kotlin class called post controller. Inside the post controller, the first thing I have to do is to use post controller annotation. The second one is to map this REST controller. So I have to use request mapping Kotlin annotation, passing the value as API/v1/post. This is the base URL we are gonna use. Then this is the basic implementation. We are gonna add some functions, but we need to define the model. So I'm gonna create a package named model. Inside that I'm gonna create a Kotlin class that represents the post, so I can call it blog post. this blog post is a data class that receive a content of type string and date, creation date of type java.util.date. We could use even a boolean to indicate if the blog post contains HTML or plain text. So I could use a var is HTML of type boolean. This is my main data class. I could define some other data classes nested. So, for example, I could define a data class as author, because I could need to know who wrote that blog post. So an author basically could contain a name of type string, a surname of type string too, and in order to simplify this phase we could stop here for for the data class author definition. So we could then use the author on the post, declaring a var, a variable called author of type author. So basically this could be our abstraction of the blog post. So I am gonna map the 4 APIs we mentioned before. So going back to the documentation, I said that I would have implement a delete, a post, a put, and another post. First of all, the delete. I have to declare a delete mapping. If you remember, this mapping should get an ID, so I will attach it. After I define a fun delete post that receive a path variable called ID of type string. This could return a string also, and then, oh, I made a typo. This is the ID. Then, for the moment, we return OK. We are gonna implement it. Then I have to do a post, because I need to update a single post. So fun update post. I could receive as a request body. So request body post of type post. This could return a post as well. Obviously, I didn't call it post, but blog post. For the moment, return blog post. Turn on. I'm gonna implement it, so don't worry if it gives an error right now. I didn't wrote value here because the request mapping above is enough based on the specification I showed before. I could then implement a put, write new post that receive the same request body post blog post that returns a blog post. I write this just to remember to implement it, but this is not correct syntax in this case. And then I should implement the search method. So I have a post mapping with a value that needs to catch a search suffix. Then I define a fun do search that receives a request body post sample post blog post that returns a list of blog posts. Alright, so the next thing I'm gonna do is to create a repository. Basically, I will go for MongoDB, so not Java but Kotlin. I need an interface that I could name blog post repository. This extends Mongo repository of type blog post and string as an ID. Of course, this is Spring, so I need to use the annotation repository. I have it from Spring Data dependency I chose in Spring Initializer before. This is not enough. I have to enable Mongo repositories in my sample blog backend application file. Then I have the repository, I have the blog post. I need to define the connection between them. So I need to declare this as a MongoDB document with a collection name that I decided to call blog post. And I also need to define an ID of type string. This ID is also annotated with ID from Spring Data. This is ready. I need to define now a service to handle the post, so I can define post. First, I need to create a package for in order to be more clear. So I could use a blog post service annotated with service. This class also needs to be open, so in this case maybe not, but I decide to keep it as it is. I need to auto-wire a repository, so var repository is of type blog repository, blog post repository. I need a method to save blog post, so I need to define a fun save blog post, or it could be better write new blog post var just blog post of type blog post. Now In this case, I am writing a new blog post, so I have to make sure that that blog post should not have an ID. I also need to define those ID as those variables as nullable, because I could save that and I could not have it. I could not have those variables in input, so I need to make sure that they are nullable. Okay. In this case, if the blog post ID is not null, I need to throw an exception. That could be an illegal argument exception. And I could say a blog post must not have an ID in order to be written for the first time. Otherwise, I could set blog post creation date as today. Of course, I can import Java util, and then I return this repository save blog post. Done. I now need a method, a function to update a blog post. So update existing blog post of type blog post that will return blog post. In this case, if blog post.id is null, then I will throw an illegal argument exception, because I can update only posts that have an ID. This because the post need to be persistent on the database. I cannot update a post that does not exist. So in this case, return this repository.save blog post. Blog post. I could also update the creation date in order to consider it as update date also, not just the creation. But in this case we are doing an example, so we will not focus on all the details of the implementation. Then I need a function to delete a blog post, so delete existing blog post, receiving an ID of type string that cannot be null. Then I will return a string, this repository delete by ID, passing its ID. Basically this method is void, so I will do that inside a try catch. And if an exception is catched, then I will return KO. Otherwise, I will return OK. The latest function I need to implement is the search one. So do search that will receive a blog post, and that will return a list of blog posts. In order to query the database, we are going to use the query by example of Spring Boot, so of Spring Data, sorry. So I can do a return this repository find all, and I will pass an example of blog post. So that's all. I need to connect this blog post service, so then I will have inside my controller blog post service of type blog post service. In order to delete a post I will do return this delete post passing its ID. I will update a post by returning this update post. I will write a new post by this write new post passing its post. And also I will do a search by returning this do search sample post as example. So I made a mistake because this is a recursion and this is not the objective of the video, so I need to use blog post service, not this, because that would have caused an infinite loop, and then I will do this blog post service write new blog post, and this blog post service do search. Basically that's all. I need to start up my MongoDB, and that's done. I have previously installed a MongoDB instance on my local computer, so now I just have to configure my application properties that I would prefer using YAML. So now I have to define a spring.data.mongodb, and I am going to define, okay, so IntelliJ IDEA suggests it like that, and this is a MongoDB //localhost 27017. The database, the target database is test. I previously created it. So I can run the application. In the meantime, I could create an HTTP in order to test my application. I could define an HTTP request, so post controller.http. This is IntelliJ IDEA HTTP client I'm using, and basically I will write a test case for each one of the mappings I define here. So I have to use to declare a post to http.localhost 8080. In the meantime, we can see that the Kotlin application has just connected to our MongoDB instance. So the first one I want to do is the put I need to write before I can read. So API/v1/post of content type application JSON, and then I need to write the post. The post basically has an ID, but we don't need the ID in this case because we don't know it yet. We basically need a content of type string, so I will define hello world because that is the standard. So the creation date needs to be set by the application, so I can leave it now. And is HTML, I can set it to false. The author needs to be a complex object. So author, as we mentioned before, should have a name that could be G, and a surname, of course not with caps. That could be Smith. Now, if I run this, of course it's not a post but a put. If I run this call, this is the result of the creation. Now I can try to do a delete. HTTP localhost. I need to set API v1 post and give the ID. In this case, if I run a find, I see the created blog post. Now, if I run the delete, I should expect to see an OK, and that is, there is it. If I run again a find, I get no results. So we need to try out the update. I create again the same object. So Jim Smith another time. This is the body, so I can barely copy and paste it to localhost 8080 API v1 post content type of type application JSON. This is the body. I want to change its content by saying hello universe. Okay, we saved it. So before, with the last find, the content was hello world. By this, in this case, this is hello universe, so it worked. Now I can try out the search by the query by example that I mentioned before. So I need to write search here, or do search, no, search. Do search was the fun name. Okay, I can search by its author, whose name is Smith, is Jim. If I do this post, as I expected, I see a list of blog posts containing the created one. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a comment, press the like button and subscribe to this channel. See you in the next video.